Ay, it's a new world, gotta adapt to it. Innovation, information, more than the average. Rushing, please ignore the interruptions. Cause this is digital discussions.
Welcome to a new episode of Digital Discussions. I'm Siano, your host from Sabre Real Estate, alongside of the one and only Doug Jerum. Today, we have Jamin Warren from TwoFiveSix. We're excited to hear all about what Jamin's up to. So, Jamin, thank you and welcome to Digital Discussions. Give us a little background on yourself and TwoFiveSix, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So I run TwoFiveSix. We're a strategic consultancy that help brands engage in the world of video games. And I've been doing this for about the last 3 years, but my history of video games goes back a fair bit longer. I started my career, I was a reporter at the Wall Street Journal and covered arts and entertainment for them for about 5 years. That was right around the time, a lot of things that we're seeing now were getting started right around that period. So, Minecraft had just come out. This is in 2008. The App Store had just launched, and all of a sudden you started having more mobile games as in existence. Facebook launched its own gaming platform. There was PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. There was so much that was happening in gaming, and I thought, well, hey, I'm at the paper of record of culture and finance. I figured there's this giant industry that we should be writing about. Unfortunately, my editor did not see things the same way.
That's their problem at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I get I get to sort of put that feather in my cap. But so a lot of disgruntled 20-somethings, I left to start my own company. I thought, hey, I can do this myself, and started a media company called Kill Screen. We ran a magazine and a website. We did the first ever arcade at the Museum of Modern Art. We were cited by the Supreme Court as a defense of free speech, something I was really proud of. And we started getting more calls from brands and agencies that were increasingly becoming interested in gaming, but weren't quite sure where to get started. And so they often, sort of reach out to whoever is close by. I read this thing or I saw this person. So we didn't have a structured set of services. So that's what ended up sparking the consultancy a couple years back. We focus mostly on audience and channel strategy, and then we'll also do content strategy and execution as well. So it's been a really fun ride, and obviously it's a great time to be talking about games, given how many people are at home and definitely doubling up on their work computers with gaming experiences with their friends and family.
For sure, yeah. So I mean, my 8-year-old and 5-year-old are basically holed up in their bedroom playing Fortnite. Communicating with their peer group through headsets, as opposed to going outside and in this wonderful weather and riding bikes and doing things that we did as kids. But before we get into that, I'm actually going to turn it to Doug for a second, because the majority of our audience is in the commercial real estate space, and the same way that your industry has pivoted and enjoyed maybe an acceleration of things that were already happening pre-COVID, as a result of COVID. Doug, I'm going to turn it to you because, we obviously were excited to get Jamin on Digital Discussions, but can you tell me exactly why you were excited about it and maybe the correlation about what he does and what we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And Jamin, you and I've spoken previously. I actually was came across you at the PSFK virtual retail conference, where they were all kinds of different people speaking on many different aspects of the retail business as a whole, anywhere from e-commerce to real estate, to all different things. And of course, when I saw that you were there, was the first thing I registered for. Since I have a strong history in gaming and a lot of passion around that. That continues to this day and continues to grow, and also in the esports space. And I've been evangelizing as much as I can about the opportunities to connect gaming to the real world, to the physical world. And I believe that there's a lot of opportunities to allow people to have a firsthand experience with all of these things that currently just live on on their screens and in their digital life. And so you really are at even more so at the center of enabling some of that, in that brands come to you to understand how they reach that audience, and what are the different ways they can get in front of that audience. And while the physical world certainly isn't the only channel,
Yeah.
it may not be the preliminary initial channel they go through. In my view, now and certainly more going forward, it will be a very strong channel for that to happen. And so that was made all sense in the world to get together with you to talk to the audience and talk about that broadly, and also specifically how you've applied it to retail maybe, and if things that you see happening, whether they've been done yet or not. So
Sure.
would love to, and maybe you can you gave a great kind of overview in your talk about sort of how a couple of different ways that brands can market to to the gaming audience. And I thought it was very concise and clear. So maybe a quick version of that
Sure.
to get us going would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I find one of the biggest challenges in terms of working in the gaming space, or particularly working with brands that might be new to the gaming space, even if they have, they're members of the team that play games, taking that first step and trying to figure out, like, how do I even get involved? Because thankfully we've moved out of this world. People ask, like, do you play games, and moved into this world where they say, what games do you play? So everybody plays something. So whether it's like mobile is half of the market, for example. It could be Microsoft casual games. It could be Animal Crossing. It could be Fortnite. Like, the range of experiences. There are about 2.4 billion gamers on the planet right now. That number will continue to grow. The average age of people playing games is, at this point, the average age of humans on the planet, it's about 40 years old. I watched it tick up year over year. It was like the average age is 30, average age is 31, 32, and now it's going to sit right in the middle. And so it's really exciting, and we're definitely moving also to a place where you have these multi-generational play experiences as well. Doug, we talked about this briefly, where you have like parents who grew up playing games and are now bringing that literacy.
Little Sega Genesis. Maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, that's so different from like my parents, who like did not grow up playing video games at all. They appreciated the fact that I did, but like it wasn't a personal experience for them.
Sure.
So,
right.
So a lot of times, like, brands, when they're coming to the space, they have a lot of anxiety around like doing something for the first time. And I totally understand that, because the reality is that gaming it's this enormous category, and there's so many nuances there, some of which are understood, some of which are not yet understood. But one of the biggest is really around this identity question. So if you're thinking from a brand perspective, like, I'm looking at my audience segmentation reports, I'm thinking about like, who are my marketing personas? And then you look at gamers as a category, and there's this tendency to really think of them like monolithically, because there's this core tension at the heart of this word gamer, right? So you kind of, I just said it, 2.4 billion gamers on the planet. And the challenge is that describes, the word gamer, if you like looked it up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it's, someone who plays games, right? So that covers a lot of different people. But that social identity piece,
not really what it means, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so to self-identify as a gamer, you're going to have a much narrower set. And so understanding those distinctions is really, really important. So if you're saying, like, explicitly as a brand, like, I want to target gamers, or you're saying that you want to target people who play games, because that will inform your strategy in a different way than saying, like, I want to target gamers who are, more closely identified as like young millennial males, right? So that is a specific category. And so I see a lot of confusion sometimes with brands where they're looking to step into the space where their audience might not be in that category, but they have, everybody always wants to chase like everybody always wants to chase like, younger millennials, whether that's actually who your customers are or not. So.
Right.
Can you give us an example of a brand that maybe fell into that category that you have communicated with and didn't necessarily know exactly what their audience was? Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Yeah, I can use a broader example. And
yeah, just to
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
I think a lot of people that that are watching are not necessarily very experienced in what we're talking about, including myself. But I'm also probably more experienced than a lot of people watching. So
Sure, yeah. So one good like recent example, there's a game called Animal Crossing that came out earlier this year. What's described as like a life simulation game. You create your own character, and then your character gets plopped down on this island. The island's populated with animals, and really you can kind of do whatever you want. You can camp, you can fish, you can customize. You basically customize your character. There's
Plant flowers.
plant flowers. Yeah, there's so many things that you can do, and the game, has been incredibly popular. It's sold over 10 million units, and that's incredibly popular. It's an existing franchise, so people were already familiar with the title. But one of the things that I saw was, there's some interesting brand intersections there because the game allowed for user-generated content, which is very unusual. Typically, games that's rare that they would let you bring outside material into the game space. Some games do it, but most do not. And so, what you saw was different brands looking for ways to integrate like their existing identity into Animal Crossing. So you had, KFC in the Philippines. They built out this custom KFC, and you could go and actually like talk to you could actually talk to the colonel who would give you who'd give you like a coupon. So that they were using it kind of in a more traditional kind of like retail sense, like a takeover of a retail place, but in a digital environment. You had the Getty Museum, for example. The game Animal Crossing lets you import your own art, and so the Getty opened up their library of royalty-free art and then made it accessible to people in Animal Crossing. So if you wanted a Vermeer painting in your Animal Crossing environment, they made it really easy for you to do that. So one of the things that's interesting that Animal Crossing, like the visual appearance, like, it's kind of, I describe as like cutesy, kind of like, definitely cutesy. I think it would code as like sort of being quote unquote like juvenile. But if you look at the demographic of like who owns Switches, Nintendo released a report a couple years ago. They found it was 86% male and mostly between the ages of 19 and 35. And you'd think that, given everything we know about quote unquote gamers, that's the audience that's playing first person shooters or like, aggressive multiplayer games. And like, no, actually like Animal Crossing, if you want to reach young men, Animal Crossing is an incredible way to go about doing that.
Yeah,
and
like
so,
GTA or Animal.
Right, exactly.
Crossing, one or the other, yeah.
Exactly. And so, that's the kind of like nuance where I can understand from a brand perspective, they're like, there's a disconnect between like who plays games and who gamers like actually are in those specific environments. So that's like a really good example. So if you're KFC, like that makes a lot of sense. Like you're targeting like young millennials. But if you are, let's say like Marc Jacobs, which did some stuff on Instagram, specifically related to Animal Crossing fashion shows, I can't speak to Marc Jacobs' specific demographics, but I'm going to guess that it's probably not 86% male, right? So, so that's the thing that is really important for people to understand, that like gaming is a really big universe and it can be really hard to figure out your place. So very specific.
I mean, that is like, there's a direct correlation in everything that you said and what we do, on the retail side when it comes to a omni-channel and brick and mortar strategy of understanding the psychographics, demographics, and how to make sure that we're putting our doors where the target audience is, right? So I think that's a very interesting thing that a lot of folks who are in our space would not necessarily think about. And it's very interesting to see the correlation between retail real estate and gaming. Great example. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we really advise clients on. I think that there's a tendency to want to look at gaming and say, like, just throw out the playbook. Like, we got to start from scratch. And so one of the things that we often advise is like, work from the things that you already know. And so, so if you think of gaming space, I mean, all the strategy and research that you already do on the retail side, those techniques and those can be very useful in terms of working in virtual spaces as well. So don't like, we try to advise people, like, obviously if you've not done like audience segmentation research at all, right? Like that's going to be a problem. But like, if you have, you can find your clan inside of gaming spaces. And I think you also can apply some of the, brick and mortar retail perspectives to gaming spaces, because they are, they're not just, you mentioned Fortnite earlier, like they are increasingly not just like games that you sit down and play. Like the way I used to play games, and to some extent still do, is like you buy a game, you play it for 20, 25 hours, the game is done, and then like, you resell it or you give it to a friend or something. And What's happening now in the world of games is that games like Fortnite are increasingly becoming the norm, where it's called games as a service, where it's much more like Netflix or Hulu, right? Where you buy the game and then it continues to feed you content over a longer period of time. And so when you look at the most popular games online right now, League of Legends, Overwatch, Fortnite, Counter-Strike Go, these are all games that are now 8, 9, 10 years old because they're continually fresh, but we're increasingly having to think about them as social spaces. And so I think for folks in the retail crowd, like you have experience there, right? You have experience in the real world in terms of figuring out like how to reach people in physical spaces. Some of those skills and techniques are going to be useful for you. And so that's why gaming is a great place for you to go, because there's definitely, any place where people congregate and hopefully are exchanging ideas and hopefully money as well, right? That's a place where, at retail, you can definitely be thinking about that. So I think there's definitely a lot of crossover between the space that I look at and yours as well.
So something very interesting several things that are interesting to me. First off, I'm going broke by buying V-Bucks as a result of my 2 children. So,
yeah, exactly.
When you talk about spending money, it's very interesting when my son, who's 8 years old, pulls me into his room to watch a Travis Scott concert on Fortnite.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, my mind was blown because, it just ties everything together and gets, culture, pop culture, things of that nature in front of a young audience. And my children, who had no clue who Travis Scott was, all of a sudden are big Travis Scott fans. So can you help me understand who actually comes up with the creative strategy to put Travis Scott on Fortnite, and what kind of information they have from either Epic Games or anybody that kind of says you should do this? Because there's going to be this impact and ROI as a result of it. Because I started to think through it on my own, but I would love to hear it from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can really think about that Travis Scott concert. I mean, that's like doing something with the Super Bowl or the World Cup, right? It's like, it's the most expensive, highest visibility. And the fact that it's a custom engagement, they worked with Epic Games to sort of recreate the world. They basically shut the whole game down so that everyone could be a part of this experience. I think one of the important things to understand about that is, it's interesting you mentioned that for your kids who had not heard Travis Scott. I think the reality is that, like, this was great for Fortnite players overall, but I think it's also important to understand, like, when you're doing those engagements, like, the goal for Epic Games as a company, like, their core business is selling software licenses for Unreal Engine, right? That's their core business. That's what drives their valuation. So it's good to know that, because when you're a brand that's looking to approach, a video game company to do something on the in-game advertising side, understanding, like, what are the levers that are driving their business, I think is really, really important. And so a lot of what has made a bunch of these in-game experiences, whether, Nike has done some stuff, Marvel has done some stuff, they all are super custom inside of Fortnite, but all of them, what they do is they showcase, ultimately at the end of the day, how flexible Fortnite is as a community. But then the, Unreal sales team uses that as examples, like, hey, look at all the cool things that you can do with this engine to help drive sales. So I think it's important. So when you're thinking about, from a creative strategy standpoint, approaching games, and if you want to do something specifically in game with a game publisher or game partner, understanding what is going to make them interested is really, really important. Because one of the things that I see is, like, obviously after the Travis Scott thing, now it's like, hey, I want to do a Travis Scott thing, or like, I want to do something with Fortnite. I want to do something with Fortnite. And there's a scarcity problem. There's only one Fortnite. It's, one of the biggest social spaces on the planet. They don't do stuff all that often. They have their own, original content that they're pushing out to players. So, like, there are very few examples. Also, Travis Scott, like, fits in really nicely. Some of the other music things that they had done had been.
They did a great 3 DJs with
exactly.
Deadmau5 and 2 others. That was super interesting.
Yeah. Exactly. And Fortnite was also launching this music program for the summer. So, like, again, these things are not just one-offs. Like, Epic is very smart, and they understand that they were looking for ways to bring and activate an existing audience.
When they decide what artists who decides, was it Travis Scott's team or was it Fortnite who came up with that concept? And, do you know the audience, the average, what the demographic is for Fortnite?
Yeah. So in terms of like how those relationships come out, I don't have like, first person information in terms of like who approached who.
Yeah, but just in
That's
general, how does that work typically?
Yeah, I mean, so Fortnite, it's interesting. Like, Fortnite only recently, Epic Games recently brought over a brand person to run marketing for them from Nike recently. And so, because traditionally, like Fortnite it's been very interesting. Fortnite hasn't had a like chief brand officer or someone who's responsible. They really let the community kind of dictate like what things are going to be popular. So, my gut tells me like with Fortnite, when they're looking to evaluate partnerships, they're thinking about two things. One, is it going to showcase, the existing technology that they already have? I think the second thing is it going to resonate and be a natural fit for their existing audience, which at this point is so large that it's hard to kind of pinpoint there's like a specific person. There's hundreds of millions of people that play Fortnite on a regular basis. But one thing I will say is that like the audience, tends to skew obviously a lot younger, in part because of the play style for Fortnite. It's competitive. You look at the guy who won the Fortnite Pro-Am, won like $1 million. It's a teenager. Fortnite has had issues where like some of the best players have been under the age of 13, so they can't qualify for these paid tournaments. Like, it's a game that really definitely privileges youth and reflexes in terms of for anyone who's played Fortnite before.
Yeah.
And so from an audience standpoint, but that said, like if you look on mobile, for example, the audience on Fortnite actually tends to be more even 50-50 between men and women. And so, Fortnite is big enough now that you can start to like segment a bit more inside of that. It's so big as a channel in the same way you wouldn't say like, who's the average Twitter user? You'd say like, well, okay, so there's like Black Twitter, and that has a certain like tone and personality. And there's like political pundit Twitter, and that kind of has a different sort of zone and personality. We're getting to that place with gaming as virtual spaces where there's not like sort of like an average person there. It's kind of like you sort of have to target specifically like who are you trying to reach.
It's so big that
Yeah,
there's so many
right.
different verticals within it, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And so Travis Scott, I think some of the music stuff that they've done, Marshmello was another good example. They've done some music stuff. I do think like DJ, specifically like EDM culture, has worked really well with the look and feel of Fortnite, which tends to be like sort of like bright, colorful, kind of quasi-futuristic. So I think there's some overall like brand guidelines. Like not everyone is going to work inside of Fortnite. As much as I would like love to see like Dolly Parton in Fortnite, like it's probably not going to happen. Probably not. So yeah.
Awesome.
One of the things that on the other side of this coin that while can be very entertaining is also sort of something that brands are thinking about the space need to get right or be really aware of, and that is authenticity.
Yeah.
And what do you have to be mindful of when messaging to the audience, because the list is long and the trail is bloody of those who have have come inauthentically. It takes about a split second for the audience to figure it out, and when they do, you're all done. And you will never be punished harder for being inauthentic than trying to get into this space and doing it wrong. Maybe talk a little bit about
Sure.
that and how you help people avoid that, or what you tell them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the number one thing to be thinking about when you're thinking about how to reach gamers, players of games in an authentic way is really about adding value. So what is the add? Because I think a lot of the critiques have been like when brands move into the gaming space, they're not specifically adding value. And that can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes it means like supporting a specific influencer, like on Twitch or another streaming platform. That's a way that like you're adding value. In some cases, like you're seeing with esports, that could be like partnering on building a new venue or something like that and having the brand rights to it, right? That's a way that you can add value. Sometimes it means like helping partner to bring a game to fruition. You've seen this in the past with like the Halo franchise, where they'll do co-marketing arrangements with, companies like 7-Eleven, for example. And that's a way that you can add value because they'll give out free game codes or in-game items, right? Those are all ways that you can add value. So I think that needs to be the guiding principle, is like, think about it from the player's perspective. what are the ways that you are going to be specifically like adding value to their experience like inside of a given game, their experience from a community standpoint, their experience from a live or experiential standpoint. That has to be like the number one concern. I think the second big thing that I give guidance on from an authenticity standpoint is that gamers are not, when you're doing stuff in gaming, don't have a check the box strategy. I see this a lot where you feel like, oh, we've covered all the gamers. I see it a lot with like esports right now, where there's a sense in which like, oh, if I've sponsored an esports team, I've like got all the gamers covered. It's like, no, you've got like a very small percentage. If you look overall, like at the overall market for video games, Newzoo projects that esports will be, $1 billion industry in over the next couple years. Gaming is an $150 billion industry.
Right.
And so I think being really smart about like creating longer term relationships and looking at this audience in a couple different ways. So you see that a lot where like, I feel like I've done this one gaming thing. The last thing I think is really important is like, make sure like from an authenticity standpoint, like make sure that it connects to like your existing brand. I think that's another thing is that like gamers are they're very smart. You see this a lot, like they're very smart and they know when they're being talked down to, or they feel like they're being put in the box. And so don't abandon the things that have made your brand meaningful. Like that stuff is important. That it can be something that's interesting, unique, and original. So if there's a lot of like, hey, hello teenagers, like, hey gamers, like we're here to like, they will sniff that stuff out. So just part of the authenticity side means like making sure that like your brand guidelines and what you want to do with your company, make sure that comes through as well. You don't have to say that like, we're going to change everything. We have to use like neon, right? We have to use neon and we have to do something that's EDM related. And then you like look at the company and it's like, there's nothing about that resonates with you as a company. So that just means that there's a mismatch between the audience that you think you're reaching and the audience you actually want to reach. So those are like I'd say those are like the three big things when you're thinking about like getting started is like, make sure it's really important. Those things are really, really important when you're looking to develop an authentic point of view, or authentic, like hopefully first and multiple engagements in the gaming community.
Well, so just something we had talked about previously that I been impressed with was State Farm insurance, right? So not the first thing you think about in the gaming space.
Yeah.
But I think they have navigated it really well, and they've made a large investment and over a relatively speaking, long period of time.
Yeah.
They didn't try too hard. Like they did things where their voice was pretty quiet, but their presence was there. So they did title sponsorship with League of Legends, and have continued to do it, and then have branched out from there and getting involved. As you said, don't just make it one and done. They've gotten into partnerships with specific personalities and content creators, and
yeah, absolutely,
have methodically grown.
So for somebody who actually hasn't seen State Farm in a game, what does that look like?
So like what this looked like, it started out, so League of Legends is an esport, and it has caster desks. So there's a desk like on ESPN with 3 people talking about the game.
Yep.
And that desk has State Farm logo on it, and this is this segment, or League of Legends sponsored by State Farm. Simply that, and just being there, it does make sense. Like gamers do need insurance. Like while initially you're like, what does this have to do with League of Legends? Nothing. It has to do with what the customer, their customers, they're playing the game. But they just navigated it really well, because it didn't hit you over the head with it or try to be, State Farm and neon. They were just State Farm, and they were just there. And they just continue to have a quiet voice, but put money and effort into things that clearly they've got good guidance on, like who gamers care about, what they care about, and they're putting their sponsorship behind those things consistently. So I think they've done a good job as what would be a non-endemic brand, right? So it's not, HyperX or SteelSeries for equipment, or, Alienware or any of those things. It's somebody who isn't in the gaming space as a brand because they supply to it. So
similar to product placement in movies, right?
And there's, Jamin, you spoke, you can speak on that, because you had some great examples of some things that are probably coming in that arena.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most popular places, so there's a whole category of gaming engagement, so in-game advertisements. And a lot of times we think of that stuff as being A lot of times product placement is a way that can happen. Some of the more creative ways have been on the simulation side. So with gaming, so a really interesting example is Farming Simulator, which is, I didn't mention this in the talk, Doug, but so Farming Simulator is exactly as it sounds. It's a long running series. You basically play as a farmer, and they have all these great partnerships with companies like John Deere, for example. And so there's a lot of crossover between, you know, farming enthusiasts and John Deere. And so they've had a really healthy partnership between those two on the licensing side to figure out like, hey, what's going to be authentic to folks in the farming simulator community. It's not something we often think about, but it's a very, very well-selling video game. It's been around for over 10 years. It's very successful. So there's lots of places where you can do stuff like that. Sports games, also a really popular place where that can happen. Pizza Hut did this with Madden, where they sponsored the in-game stadium. And that's a great example. I mentioned adding value. Like that's such a great example of adding value, because when you're playing a sports simulation game, you know, as a name, you're playing Madden or NBA 2K, like you want that experience to be as realistic as possible. And given that there's a lot of brand, you know, a lot of out of home activity already in sports games, it fits really, really well. That is like actually one of the challenges on the esports side, is like doing stuff in game with esports doesn't totally make sense. It usually doesn't. The games are usually, the creators are very protective of their IP. So you have to find ways, like Doug, I mentioned with State Farm, to be sort of a wrapper around this fantasy experience. But sports simulation games are a great way to do it. Another great example, a really interesting kind of more guerrilla example, is Wendy's. They did something in Fortnite.
Love this one.
The Wendy's social team, where there was an in-game event where you had Team Burger versus Team Pizza in Fortnite that was already happening. And so the Wendy's team built this Wendy's sort of Wendy's looking avatar, and was in the game kind of advocating for destroying all the pizza machines to kind of advocate for the value of, you know, 100% fresh beef. Right. And so that was something where they didn't necessarily have to do an over the top partnership with Fortnite, but they found a really creative way to be active in the video game as their brand in a way that was like funny and creative. And then they found ways to, the Wendy's team has been very good about, again, talking about integrated, like they have it connected to like their existing Twitch execution. So they're finding ways to not just do something in games, but they're looking for ways to extend, amplify through existing channels. It's not just a one-off for them. So those are some examples that have been really fun to watch over the past, couple years.
Those are great examples and very helpful to understand the landscape. But with that Wendy's example, so who would actually come up with that concept? Is it somebody at Wendy's? Is it somebody like yourself? Is it somebody within the game? Who actually comes up with these concepts and then actually executes them?
It can be all of the above. I've seen it each way. So sometimes it's like the agency themselves, where they have a campaign idea. They're looking for either media placements, or they're looking for ways to spend existing media dollars to support a specific campaign initiative. Sometimes a creative team comes up with an out of the box idea and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did something like this in games? Sometimes it comes from the brand side, so the John Deere example that I mentioned, that's something that can be driven by the brand side, where they're like, hey, we have a licensed property. Let's go look for places where we can be present in a way that's natural and authentic. And then of course, that's the stuff that we work on with clients as well, is helping them think about, audience and channel strategy before you place that first dollar, making sure you know exactly what your longer term plan and vision is going to be. The ideas definitely come from a variety of different areas.
Cool.
Yeah.
Curious to understand really how COVID impacted your industry.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, we're all living in a different world, and clearly forced into a major experiment that definitely opened our minds to creating new habits and doing things that maybe a lot of folks were less open to doing pre-COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think COVID, like a lot of things, Zoom, for example, like accelerated existing trends. So, there are already half of American households, for example, already owned a gaming console. Penetration of video games for those under the age of 18 is basically 100%. So a lot of it, it was accelerating things that were already happening, but there's been some really concrete impacts. One interesting thing is that from a video game development standpoint, that hasn't really been impacted at all, because video games, much like animation, they've already moved to a remote workflow environment. So unlike film and TV, right, that's really struggling, like how are we going to make stuff there? Maybe it's funny when you open up, like I was looking, you look at like Netflix or Hulu and like the new content that's coming out, you can tell it's very much like quarantine. The new stuff is like very much limited to like what you can do. So, like the floor is lava, or like these kinds. So they're either, it's a mixture of kind of these shows where you can have social distancing, do something unique and original. Animation is another one. But video games had been pioneering, or are you thinking about from a workflow standpoint, how can they ensure that there isn't, because they already work with these global teams on the, in terms of populating the games with characters and whatnot. So from a content standpoint, I think one of the big underestimated stories is that like that has not been impacted like really at all. Like the games that you're not seeing, like the way that, Christopher Nolan's movie Tenet is like going to come out at some point. They keep moving the date. You're not seeing that in video games, because
Which,
it's,
by the way, they did the trailer in
exactly.
Fortnite.
Yeah, they did that in Fortnite because it's like one of the few places, quote unquote, where you can get a lot of people together. So from a content perspective, video games are continuing to grow, and they have in a lot of ways a lot of advantages because they've already adjusted to a fully digital environment. A second big thing that I've been seeing, which has been really interesting, I alluded to it earlier. PC sales have been growing, and one of the things that you're definitely seeing is people who are working from home are thinking about, hey, I have a new audience of PC gamers in particular. I grew up on PC games. There's a whole new audience of people who didn't own consoles, but they own, like, for a work computer, they had to get something nice. You had to get a monitor, and all of a sudden you have a makeshift like gaming station now. That's basically your desk, in a way that for an audience that maybe wouldn't have voluntarily done that, like outlined a portion of where they live to have their monitor and their computer, and then like that's their space. Now all of a sudden, PC gamers have been doing that for years. And so now all of a sudden you have PC game sales are starting to rise. People are using their work computers as a way to do stuff online. I think the last and most interesting trend to me has been like the use of like gaming tools and technology for non-gaming purposes. So it's everything from like church services, like on Twitch, for example, or if you look at Discord, which is a chat app. 30% of the, over 300 million people that use Discord, it's a huge platform already. 30% of that usage is not related to gaming at all. You have educators that are using it because it's a great way to like create separate channels for them to engage with students who might already be using Discord. Other types of interests. I'm in the bird watching, so I have there's a birding channel on Discord that I'm a part of. So that's been a very interesting trend as well, that like, because gaming presumes people want to interact in a seamless way, a lot of the tools that gamers often use can be a great test case for new behaviors, for people to use those for other things. So those have been three kind of, there will be more, but those have been three big things that I've been noticing that have been very interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting. The PC sales, makes all the sense in the world. Wasn't on my radar. Wasn't thinking about that, but they just keep going. The death of PCs is greatly exaggerated, I guess.
Yeah, even it's interesting. I wrote something on this about like what you can learn from video game streamers for your Zoom setup, and so
big time.
Streamers spend a lot of time thinking about like what equipment should I be using, and so you look at some of the stuff that's been chronically sold out. It's been Logitech, their cameras, right? Those have been chronically sold out.
Day one.
Microphones, condenser microphones, like all these things that previously the only the audience for that was basically people who play video games online and people who are basically content creators in the gaming space. Now all of a sudden, like, hey, everybody needs that stuff. You need like a great webcam that hopefully has like some automatic focus and white balance. You need like a good mic, like these types of things that previously have been the province of just people who played games online, or just hardcore people who just want to have a really good like Zoom setup. Now it's like, hey, that's actually like that has real world ramifications if you've been thinking about that stuff already.
Yeah, totally. And I find myself less and less patient for really like bad audio, bad lighting. Like, we've been doing this for 5 months. Come on, let's step it up a little bit here. Exactly. I admit I'm one of the people that sort of looking at the streamers on Twitch going, all right, so how are they doing that? What camera is it? So I have an unusual interest in it.
with
yeah,
your
there's a lot you
background,
can
it
learn.
makes a lot of sense, Doug.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know, but it makes a lot of sense. So my lighting
Yeah.
right now must be driving you nuts.
No, you're
By the way, as
you're
time
fine.
goes on, I keep figuring out how to tilt this lamp up higher and move
Totally.
this,
Yeah.
So I think
No,
I'm actually looking better now than I did about 40 years ago.
you're in pretty good shape. You're in
Get a
good
ring
shape.
light. Like you'll get
No,
it
I
all.
don't. It's funny because we've really, in a lot of ways, pioneered vlogging in commercial real estate, and using video and social media in different ways than most people in the industry. And we're at it a long time, which is also how Doug kind of gravitated to joining Sabre. And I love having these conversations. And what really excites me is that we're having a conversation that a lot of folks that are in the commercial real estate space watching this are probably still scratching their head trying to
Yeah.
figure out why we're even interested in having this discussion and talking about gaming and product placement, and how the virtual kind of world ties into our real world. And that always excites me, because I think it takes a very crazy thing like a pandemic for people to realize how important all of the things that we've been doing at Sabre over the last
Yeah.
4 years or so, like how important the things that are not necessarily so obvious to the majority of the folks in our space. Like 4 years ago, when I had somebody following me around with a camera, watching what I was doing and putting out a weekly episode, that was insanity to a lot of people in our
Yeah.
industry. And then all of a sudden, COVID happens. Nobody's even everybody's basically invisible, and we're not. We're still going about our business as if nothing much changed. Clearly, a lot did, but it's interesting to really see the cross contamination ripple effect of how everything has changed, and how what was so unique 5 months ago is, to your point, becoming commonplace with Zoom, and figuring out how to increase the quality of your video and your sound. And I'm sure so many people who
Yeah.
never thought about these things pre-COVID are thinking a lot about them. Clearly, Doug and I have been thinking about these things pre-COVID, but to our audience, I think a lot of what you're talking about, they're not necessarily thinking about. And tonight, I hate to keep using Fortnite as an example, but tonight when they go into their kids' rooms, or
Yeah.
they themselves get onto Fortnite, right? They're going to look at the game completely differently than they did prior to seeing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely encourage people, like, if you're interested in the space, find something that you like, dip a toe in. Like, I think it's not it's not zero sum. Like, you don't, if you play Fortnite for a little bit, maybe turn your mic off, obviously, but like you getting into those spaces, I think is really, and getting over the hump. I think that's something that's really critical. And I think gives you a deeper appreciation for understanding like why gaming has such a passionate fan base. And if you haven't like played any games, you're kind of always saying like, hey, gaming is a waste of time. Joe Rogan this week, I think recently, he was saying gaming is a total waste of time. You could be learning jujitsu. And
So that was interesting, and he wasn't quite saying that, because he was really questioning it, because he's big time gamer. And what I found really interesting about the question he was proposing, he was the answer to the question. Like he's saying, like, so instead of spending all this time playing games, you could be out learning jujitsu, and in 3 years you could have your own studio, and then you've got all these clients, and you have the nice car. And I'm sitting there looking at it, going, what you're not talking about whether gaming is a problem. You're talking about whether people's interests and motivations are powerful enough. Like if you really want to do the jujitsu, for most people, those that don't have a actual addictive problem, like any other substance, when you find that thing that gets you going, then you will do less gaming. The problem is gaming is pretty fun, so the bar is pretty high. But Joe Rogan did pretty good even though he says he's essentially addicted to gaming, you know, and he's in good shape, he's very successful, etc. So I just found it really funny the way he was framing that. Was like, worked out okay for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think sometimes there's like a tinge of guilt, and I think that's residual kind of cultural guilt. And if you grew up playing games, having to sort of explain, like, I play games, but don't worry, I do other things as well. And I think over time that will become, become less common. But I understand, like, you do like, you sometimes feel like you should be doing like other,
for sure,
you feel like you should be doing other things, but it's not, again, it's not an either or. It's like you can both be Joe Rogan and also play a lot of video games.
I think to normalize the guilt, it's like, if you feel guilty because you watch too many episodes on Netflix, or because you spent the whole day reading a book, that's the guilt you should feel. It shouldn't be special for games. It should be,
exactly,
I chose to do something recreational that at the end wasn't particular. I didn't come up with an end result that I now can carry forward. Like, I read a trashy novel, I watched a bad movie. But it's that the normalization needs to be that games are no different. It's choosing to just sort of spend your time doing something not wildly productive, whatever it is. And we're not there yet, though, because that conversation's happening. It's like, I feel this special guilt because I was playing a game.
By the way, I think, that's a very interesting point, from a parenting perspective, right? Again, bringing it back to my kids wanting to be in their room playing Fortnite with their friends the majority of the time that they're awake, basically, right? And if I didn't tell them they needed to take breaks, they would pretty much play all day. I think, COVID obviously, I think, increased that behavior and activity. Because, when you're social distancing, you can't really use better platforms than, speaking through a game and hanging out with your buddies. And, it makes a lot of sense that that's where they want to spend their time. The question that I have is, there are, I think, two schools of thought, right? There's the old school thought that, certain parents might believe that their kids are completely wasting their time away playing these games. And then somebody like myself might actually think that the tools that they'll learn through technology as a result of getting interested in gaming, potentially having an interest in coding and everything else that kind of comes along with, technology, right? Might actually help them excel in this kind of new world and in the future versus, a parent who might not allow their kids to play games as much as somebody who, looks at it as not necessarily such an evil thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, one place where I think the conversation is still moving, like, games are inherently social platforms. Like, if you look at the history of games, solitaire and golf, those are like before video games, those are the only two games that you could play by yourself. And so even in the early days of games, think about it in a retail context, like the popularity of arcades, like the attraction for arcades was that they were social places. It would bring young people in. So, every mall needed to have an arcade. That was a way that you got young people in the door to spend a long period of time. And, then games became more of an indoor activity. Arcades started to close, and in some places they didn't, like in Japan. But in general, arcades became not a thing, and so that social aspect was lost until really over the last 10 years. Every game, all these games that are popular now, I think we forget this, that they're social experiences. Like, you play them with other people, and so I think we have to make sense of, like, do I think, like, it would be worse. I think, like, I understand the desire. Like, if you have, if you're a parent and you have a kid that's spending a ton of time by themselves playing video games, right? I think that is inherently different than them spending a lot of time playing with other people, building those social bonds. Not to say that, spending time outdoors and those types of things aren't important, but I think that's been a real, in favor of parents, like, allowing their kids to play games. That's a really important distinction versus, like, I think with my childhood, like, it's mostly PC games and console stuff, and there was no internet. But, like, if I could play games with my friends online, like, I absolutely would have. So I think that's a place where I think the perception of gaming, we still sort of have the, like, gamer in a basement by themselves is, like, kind of sort of hanging over our head. And the reality is, it's like kids playing together and doing it together and building things in Minecraft together or Roblox together, or playing games and, playing Fortnite as a team, as a squad. Like, that's all stuff that I think is incredibly important. So I think that tension will resolve itself. Like we'll move back to a place where the default is that games are social, but we're still in that in between, that sort of in betweeny period where it'll take some time for that perception to change.
Quick
Yeah.
question. So, as far as social media, right, and obviously the importance of social media and how, again, we've been using it in our space for a long time, and it's had a tremendous and positive impact on our business. When you're putting together a strategy, are you using social media as in combination with what you guys are doing on games, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we've done is, because gaming is so big and there's so many things that happen, we devised this framework called the levels of play, where we divide the entire gaming universe into these 3 categories. There's play, there's share, and there's experience. So play is like some of the Fortnite examples that we use. That's stuff that happens like in the game itself. So those are like brand partnerships in a video game. That share layer, that includes all of the non-gaming social channels. So that would be Facebook, for example, or YouTube. I mean, both of those also have their own gaming variants as well. There's Facebook gaming, YouTube gaming, but also includes some specific ones to gaming. So Twitch is a mostly gaming video streaming platform. Discord, the chat app, was focused mostly on gamers. So some very specific gaming social channels that we try to advise brands to look at. And then that outer layer is like the experience layer, and that's where I think a lot of those opportunities on the retail side definitely sit, where you have things like products and services. So that could be like Fortnite on a backpack, right? Like that's part of the gaming universe, but it's different from Fortnite as a backpack inside of a video game. So when we're thinking about social, what we're thinking about, our guidance is like making sure that don't just do one thing, and make sure that you use your existing social channels to amplify any of those activities. So if you're doing something like in-game, you're doing a partnership with a game publisher, make sure that social is built into that strategy, so it's not just like a one-off. And then make sure, and the same on the experiential side, like if you do something, an esports tournament, like at your location or whatever, social can be a really impactful way in terms of drawing those customers in and helping to amplify some of the natural attractiveness of what games actually do. One of the places that we see brands like mess up is that those things are not aligned. So those do this big, like, over the top partnership with the game company, or they'll do some big experiential event with an esports thing, and they haven't been thinking all through the retail, that customer journey experience. And so gaming can fit in with other like social platforms, or it can be something that stands on its own. But we really encourage folks to be thinking like up and down, like make sure when you do stuff as with gaming, social can be the glue that drives people to other places where you ultimately need them to go. But it has to be coordinated, and it can't be sort of an afterthought. So that's a place where we advise clients. It's like, hey, help break the space up to figure out like, how much money do you have? How much time do you have, right? Like try to break it up into these categories, and then identify like places where you can be strong. For brands that already have a really strong social experience, we encourage them, like when you do gaming stuff, lean on the platforms that you already know. Like one mistake we often see is like brands they'll want to do like a Twitch channel by themselves, and there's like no you don't have, it's not an existing thing. It's like starting a YouTube channel with no followers, right? Like unless you're going to be committed to it long term, it's much better to do a partnership with an influencer who has an existing channel. So that's the stuff where, if you have a strong Instagram presence, then you can use that to tap into gaming communities. But if you don't try and do a gaming thing on Instagram if you don't really have a literacy or competency there. So again, some of that stuff, it's like, just don't, you have an existing, like if you have an existing social strategy playbook, don't throw it out the window. You can just use it, and there are gamers already on those platforms that you can try to court as potential
tap into
customers.
micro influencers, or just
right.
leverage I guess an overall strategy that makes sense. Well, we're going on an hour here, and we can keep going. Doug, you have anything to add here before I have one final question?
No, I think I think we've covered a lot of stuff. Yeah, we could probably talk for another couple of hours. Yeah, really didn't even touch on.
We should do a part 2 down the road here.
Yeah, absolutely. Gaming's changing every day, so there's always like new stuff to talk about.
I will have a way better camera and mic for the next episode that we do together. Quickly before we do jump, tell us about 256. How'd you come up with the name? Give us a little background on how you created the company.
Yeah, absolutely. 256, the name, it grew out of a media company that we had called Kill Screen. 256 is the level on which many old video games happen. So if you're familiar with like the spinning beach ball, like for a Mac, or the blue screen of death. That used to happen with old video games. So on Pac-Man and some older video games, Donkey Kong, for example, like when you got to level 256, that was functionally the end of the game because basically the hardware sort of reached its limit.
I knew there was a great reason for 256. I'm glad.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
a good question. Yeah. That's a really good question.
In terms of like us as a company, our focus is really helping brands like reach gamers as customers and to be able to apply strategic pressure on gaming as a marketing channel. And so we work with, medium to larger size companies ranging from entertainment to computer hardware, technology hardware and equipment, consumer electronics, just helping them really find their place in the world of games. A lot of times, these brands, they struggle to find an authentic voice for themselves. There's a lot of folks like sitting on the sidelines, or they've done something in gaming and it hasn't achieved the results that they want. And so they're thinking about writing off the whole category. But there's some dissonance there between what they're seeing in terms of the size of the gaming audience or in their own lives with their kids or, kids or nephews or whatever. And they know intellectually that gaming's a big deal, but they're not sure how they can take advantage of it. And so a lot of what separates us from other consultancies or say other substitutes, say like working directly with like an esports team, is we have a long history of working in the space. But the biggest thing is that we're agnostic. We don't, our preference, we're not going to say you have to pick this social channel or you have to work with this influencer or you have to do this activation or work with this game. We're super agnostic. We don't have a horse in that race. So we like to think of ourselves, we're an impartial partner to help you make sense of the gaming world without feeling like if you go work with a gaming publisher, they're going to tell you like, hey, you got to do something with their game. If you go work with a gaming influencer, they're going to tell you, of course, you're going to reach every game on the planet. We don't work that way. And so we like to think of ourselves as like a good advisor, a trusted advisor for someone who wants to work in gaming, but isn't concerned that there's like an ulterior motive that we're going to steer them in a particular direction. So it's been great. We've had some great clients in the past, Intel, Google. We've done some work with Warby Parker actually as well, both on the social and on the retail side, which was really fun.
How? Can you explain that? Because that's extremely relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Warby Parker, so we work with them on their first ever gaming activation. So the insight there, I think that the concern that they had, which I think is like a lot of brands, is that Warby Parker is a very design focused brand, right? They think about design throughout every piece of their experience, the stores, their identity, everything is very design focused. And that really is what makes them, in a lot of ways, that was what makes them stand out from, lens crafters or, some of these other kind of like big box, eyewear stores. And so there was some dissonance there where they were like, hey, we know gaming is a big deal, but we're not seeing it in our existing audience. So we put together, strategy for them. We did a custom pair of frames that we designed with them. We created a video game called Warbs that was both online. So we went to buy the custom frames. You could play this game. The game could also be played like at retail. So as a way to keep folks engaged in the store, as well as some social content to help support looking at that intersection between like sight and gaming. Because there's a natural tie-in there, right? Like,
sure.
There's a lot of beauty, visual beauty in video games, and obviously having a great pair of glasses to help you experience that can be really helpful. So that was a really cool project because Warby hadn't done anything in gaming at the time, and what was great about working with them is that they were really, the big insight for them was that they didn't have to go look for gamers outside of their existing audience. They just had to activate gaming as a passion point for their existing one. And so that is definitely, I think, for folks looking to do stuff, you don't have to like go outside of your existing audience to find gamers. Your audience is already playing games. You just have to figure out how to activate them in a way that makes sense for you, in a way that makes sense for them. So, but yeah, those are the kinds of projects that we love. We love working on helping folks who haven't done stuff in gaming do something for the very first time.
That's awesome, man. Well, listen, we thank you so much for taking the time, and you're doing great stuff, man. Keep up the great work. And
thanks.
Thank you for setting this up because
absolutely,
this is really, really exciting stuff.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Jamin, thanks for joining us. It's great talking to you again. And, we'll talk some more. We'll have you back, as things advance.
Anytime. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. See you. Bye.
'Cause this is digital discussions.